She interrupted a billionaire's wedding with a baby in her arms and one word on her lips, Papa. In that moment, the world as Julian Carter knew it began to collapse publicly, irreversibly, and in front of 300 of Boston's elite. The Carter family estate in Concord, Massachusetts shimmered under 1,000 fairy lights. The garden, manicured to perfection, was transformed into a luxurious outdoor chapel. Crystal chandeliers dangled from white, rose-covered arches. A quartet played soft classical music as sunset bathed the scene in gold. It was the wedding of the year of the decade. Everything about it screamed wealth control perfection. And at the center of it stood Julian Carter, 45 years old, heir to one of the most powerful pharmaceutical empires in the country. Julian, in a tailored black tuxedo, stood at the altar like a man who had calculated every moment of this day. From the designer cufflinks to the vintage Rolex on his wrist, nothing was accidental. He had spent decades building a pristine public image, brilliant, disciplined, untouchable. He wasn't just a CEO, he was Boston royalty. Marrying Sabrina Voss, the poised and politically connected daughter of Gerald Voss, was the final flawless step in cementing that legacy. Guests sat in awe. Judges, venture capitalists, media magnates, all watching the merger of two dynasties. Cameras rolled discreetly, and social media buzzed with curated snippets of perfection. Sabrina, in a couture ivory gown with a 5-carat diamond necklace, stood beside Julian with the poise of a senator's daughter and the ambition of someone ready to become first lady, if not of a country, then of a billion-dollar empire. The officiant raised his voice. If anyone can show just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now or forever. Hold their peace. Silence followed. Then came the click of small shoes against stone. Soft but insistent. Heads turned. Murmurs began. A girl no more than 10 in a faded yellow dress with her hair braided in colorful beads walked steadily down the aisle. In her arms, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, was a baby boy with skin the color of snow. The moment froze. 300 guests fell into a stunned hush. Security hesitated. After all, it was a child. But the child didn't hesitate. She walked straight toward Julian Carter, locked eyes with him, and said just one word. "Papa." Gasps rippled through the crowd like a wave breaking on stone. A few guests stood in disbelief while others craned their necks to get a better look. Phones were lifted discreetly. Boston society never missed a scandal, especially one unfolding live. Julian Carter's jaw clenched as he stood frozen at the altar. Across from him, Sabrina's eyes widened, a mask of poised elegance beginning to fracture. The flower girl, unsure of what to do, stepped out of the aisle awkwardly. The officiant mid-sentence fell completely silent. Julian's heart pounded in his chest loud against the hush that had fallen over the estate. The little girl, Lena, was standing mere feet from him now, her brown eyes locked onto his. She held the infant close, her grip gentle but protective, like she'd been doing this far too long for someone so small. A white satin shoe slipped from the baby's foot and dropped onto the stone path. No one moved to pick it up. The guests seated in the front rows, the board members' dignitaries, venture. Partners exchanged confused glances. Vivian Carter, seated in the front row, stared without blinking. Her spine remained perfectly straight, but her hands, immaculately manicured, twitched ever so slightly on her lap. This wasn't a PR disaster, it was a revelation. And revelations Julian knew too well always came with blood in the water. More gasps. Someone in the crowd muttered, "Is that baby white?" It wasn't said with malice, just stunned confusion. Lena's skin was a rich walnut tone, her eyes framed by thick lashes. The baby in her arms, wrapped in a pale blue blanket, had porcelain skin and golden curls. His cheeks flushed pink in the cool spring air, and his eyelids fluttered, agitated by the crowd. The juxtaposition hit everyone at once. Some minds jumped to adoption, others to scandal. In the age of DNA kits and viral exposés, everyone became an amateur genealogist. But Julian only saw one thing a child in need. His stomach twisted. The baby couldn't be more than 6 months old. Lena shifted her grip instinctively as the infant whimpered. She looked down at him, then back up at Julian. Her chin quivered, but her gaze didn't falter. Somehow, this tiny girl had crossed a city, infiltrated the most secure event of the year, and was now staring down a billionaire in front of Boston high society while holding a baby. There was steel behind those eyes. Not the defiant rebellion of someone with something to prove, but the quiet resilience of a child who'd run out of options. Then she said it again. "Papa." Just one word, soft but resonant, like a thread pulled through the silence. The crowd stirred. Some leaned forward, others recoiled. Sabrina made a strangled noise, something between a gasp and a growl. Her perfectly curled fingers tightened around her bouquet. Vivian Carter's expression remained unreadable, but a shadow passed through her eyes. Julian took a step forward, not even realizing he had moved. He felt as though he were standing outside his body, watching his carefully structured reality tilt off its axis. There were no press statements for this. No PR firm could manage the sensation of looking into a child's eyes and feeling something break loose inside you. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Lena's eyes shimmered. She clutched the baby closer and took another step forward. "I didn't know who else to go to," she said quietly. "Mama told me to find you if anything happened." A sharp inhale from somewhere in the crowd. A woman's voice whispered, "Oh my God!" Julian's vision narrowed. Somewhere beyond the chandeliers and rose petals and antique marble, a photographer's flash went off. He didn't blink. All he saw was a girl on the verge of tears, and the baby, who looked oddly hauntingly familiar. Julian Carter's jaw clenched as he stood frozen at the altar. Across from him, Sabrina Voss's eyes widened, a mask of calm beginning to splinter. The flower girl stopped midway down the aisle, unsure whether to keep walking or run. Even the officiant fell completely silent. Cluck. Julian's heart pounded against his ribcage, a slow thunder that drowned out the world. The girl, no more than 10, stood just feet away from him now. Her eyes, deep brown and unflinching, locked onto his. She held the baby close, arms curved protectively like she had done it every day of her life. A tiny satin shoe slipped from the baby's foot and landed on the stone path with a soft thud. No one moved to pick it up. The first few rose investors. Political allies, old money board members turned to each other with furrowed brows. Whispers started like steam under pressure. Vivian Carter sat ramrod straight in the front pew, lips drawn tight. Her expression was blank, but her fingers trembled ever so slightly in her lap. This wasn't an interruption. This was revelation. Then someone near the back said it aloud, barely a whisper, but loud enough to echo, "Is that baby white?" It wasn't said with cruelty, just sheer, stunned confusion. Lena's skin glowed a warm, deep brown. Her hair was braided neatly with colorful beads. The baby she carried, swaddled in a light blue blanket, had porcelain skin and wisps of golden hair. His cheeks were rosy from the spring air. He stirred and whimpered against her chest. It was an image none of them had words for. This wasn't an adoption photo. This wasn't a publicity stunt. The contrast between the children told a story, one that no adult in the audience was ready to interpret. Julian's gaze dropped to the baby, and something inside him twisted. The child couldn't be older than 6 months. His tiny hands clenched in reflex, his nose twitching like he smelled tension in the air. Lena shifted him higher on her shoulder with practiced care. She looked back at Julian. Her jaw trembled slightly, but her grip didn't falter. There was no drama in her stance, no rebellion, just the quiet steadiness of a girl who had run out of time and places to go. She didn't belong in this world of 5-figure floral arrangements and live-streamed luxury. And yet, here she was, stronger than anyone else in the garden. Julian's mind buzzed with 100 questions, none of which reached his lips. He could feel the edges of his carefully sculpted life curling up in the heat of this moment. And somehow, it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the truth pressing in after years of silence. Then she said it again. "Papa." One word, soft, deliberate, a thread that pierced the quiet and tied her to him. The crowd flinched, a ripple of shifting bodies and startled breath. Some leaned forward. Others recoiled. Sabrina made a strangled sound somewhere between a gasp and a growl. Her fingers tightened around the ivory bouquet in her hands. Vivian Carter blinked once. No more. Julian stepped forward without realizing. His body moved as if pulled by some invisible string, heart first, mind trailing behind. Every muscle in him screamed to maintain composure, to preserve the brand, the legacy, the Carter image. But none of it mattered. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Lena took another step forward, her gaze fixed and glowing with something ancient, grief, maybe, or hope. She clutched the baby closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mama told me to find you if anything ever happened to her." The world blurred at the edges. Somewhere near the rose-draped arch, a guest exhaled sharply. "Oh my God," someone whispered. No one knew whether it was sympathy or shock. Julian's lungs refused to fill with air. The space between him and the child and the baby felt like miles. Yet the way she looked at him, as if he were her last chance. Photographers snapped furiously, now no longer hiding it. This moment would be on the cover of every paper by morning. Still, Julian didn't look away. The girl Lena Carter, though he didn't know it yet, stood with her entire soul bared. And in that one word, that fragile papa, she tore open a past Julian had buried long ago and forced him to see the future in her arms. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was louder than any scream. It sat heavy in the air, stretching out like a pause that refused to end. The officiant, who had moments ago been speaking with ceremonial grandeur, now stood frozen. His book lowered, unsure whether to continue or flee the stage. Guests shifted in their chairs. Champagne flutes trembled in delicate hands. Whispers dissipated into stunned, breathless stares. This was no longer just a social event. It was a reckoning. One that had the quartet in the corner gently laid down their bows, unsure whether to wait for a cue or pack their instruments. The birds in the nearby trees chirped blissfully, unaware their songs eerily normal, amid the wreckage of composure unraveling below. Julian Carter remained rooted in place. His hands trembled slightly at call. He could feel the scrutiny, but he had none. And still, Lena St. Vivian Carter's composure, always impeccable, faltered. She pressed her manicured fingers to her pearls, a childhood reflex from a generation that believed posture could hold back truth. But her eyes betrayed her wide, unblinking darting between Julian the girl and the baby. Sabrina was less contained. Her face twisted into something between betrayal and disbelief. She stepped away from Julian as if he were radioactive. "You told me everything was clean," she hissed. Her voice, once trained for gentle poise in boardroom fundraisers, cracked under the pressure. "You told me there were no ghosts." "No." Sir Julian didn't respond. Couldn't. His gaze never left Lena's face. Sabrina's breath quickened. "Is she your daughter? Is that what this is?" He shook his head slowly, though whether it meant no or I don't know was unclear. She turned away from him, her voice tight and trembling. "I was your future. And that," she gestured toward Lena, "is your past." Vivian stepped forward at last, her tone sharp but brittle. "Julian, whatever this is, we will handle it. Not here, not now." But they were already far past, not now. The moment had arrived and sat firmly at the altar. Julian's temples pounded with each heartbeat. His tailored suit felt suddenly tight, restrictive. He was trained for boardroom crisis, not this. He looked at Lena, and the world fell quiet around her. She looked just like Anne. The sharp eyes, the grounded stance, that flicker of gentleness wrapped in absolute resolve. All the years he spent pushing Anne to the edges of memory came back to claim him in the shape of this brave little girl. His mind leapt to flashes of the past, Anne laughing in her lab coat, teasing him over coffee, vanishing from his life, with nothing more than a single email of resignation. He had buried the guilt, focused on ambition, told himself she moved on. But now her daughter, their daughter, was standing before him carrying a baby and a plea. He dared to glance at Vivian. Her lips were tight eyes, cold with control. She had secrets. He knew it now with terrifying certainty. Secrets she thought she could contain until today. Julian turned back to Lena, his voice caught in his throat, but his soul was already crumbling. The past had caught up with him. And it had a name. Lena's voice broke the stillness again. Quieter now. Cracked. "He's sick," she whispered, eyes wide with fear. "He wheezes at night. He hasn't eaten since yesterday." Her grip on the baby tightened slightly. Protective. Fierce. Julian took a hesitant step forward. "What happened to your mother?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Lena bit her lip. Her lower lashes shimmered with held-back tears. She didn't wake up. 3 words. Simple. Shattering. Gasps echoed in the crowd. Sabrina closed her eyes, her expression unreadable now. Vivian looked away. Lena swallowed. "She told me if anything ever happened, I had to find you. She said you'd know what to do." Julian's hands, usually so steady in surgical precision or corporate command, shook. "What's his name?" he managed. Liam, Lena replied, as if saying it gave her strength. The name hit him like a stone to the chest. His knees weakened and something in him broke open completely. Without thinking, without calculating consequences, Julian took another step forward. Slowly. Deliberately. He knelt before her not as a CEO, not as a groom, but as a man who saw a child asking for help. "May I hold him?" he asked softly. Lena looked at him, truly looked. Then she nodded. And in that moment under the arch meant for a wedding, before a stunned crowd of wealth and power, a family began to form from the ruins. The moment Julian extended his hands toward the baby, Sabrina snapped. "Security!" She shouted, her voice slicing through the air like glass. "Get them out of here!" All eyes turned to her. Her face, once sculpted in poise, was now flushed and contorted by fury. Her voice, sharpened by humiliation, echoed across the courtyard. "This is trespassing," she hissed, striding toward Julian. "This is insane. That girl, that baby, this is some con, a trap. I won't let you ruin this day." 2 security guards in formal black suits stepped forward from the far end of the aisle. Their hands hovered at their waists, unsure of protocol in a situation that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. Vivian Carter didn't move. Her eyes followed the guards, but her lips stayed tight, her hands clasped together as if by force. Sabrina pointed a trembling finger toward Lena. "She's making it up. That baby could belong to anyone. This is a public ambush. There are reporters here. Don't you see what this will do to your name, to the company?" Guests shifted in their seats. A few muttered agreements. Others remained frozen, waiting for a cue from Julian. The hum of cameras recording in the background grew louder, and then the guards moved toward Lena. "Stop!" Julian said. It wasn't a shout. It didn't need to be. His voice, low and controlled, held the same force that once made an entire boardroom fall silent mid-vote. The guards halted mid-step. Julian turned to Sabrina, standing between him and the girl, the baby of the truth. "Don't touch her," he said. His words cracked through the tension like thunder. The hush deepened. People held their breath. Sabrina blinked as if she couldn't believe he'd said it. "You're choosing her," she demanded. "Over me, over everything we built, I'm choosing to listen," Julian replied with quiet certainty. "To understand." Sabrina laughed bitterly. She could be anyone. This could destroy everything. Julian looked past her, eyes settling back on Lena. He dropped it to one knee, not caring anymore about optics or protocol. This wasn't about saving a ceremony. It was about saving something real. "What's your name?" he asked softly now. Lena looked at him cautiously. Her arms trembled slightly, not from fear, but from exhaustion, from the weight of holding her brother, of carrying the burden of truth into a world that hadn't been built to believe her. She took a breath. "Lena," she said. "Lena Wolf." Julian froze. The name hit him like a wave. Wolf. Anne's last name. His throat tightened. "Your mother," he struggled to say it, "was her name Anne?" "Anne Wolf." Lena nodded slowly. "She said you didn't know," Lena added. "She told me you used to be good before the company took everything." Julian's breath caught. The world slowed. Somewhere behind him, Sabrina let out a sound, a sharp exhale, like she had been punched. Vivian, still seated, bowed her head ever so slightly as if confirming something silently to herself. Julian looked down at the baby, now stirring in Lena's arms. "What's his name?" he whispered. "Liam," Lena said. "But he's not mine. He's my uncle. Mama said he was your brother." Julian's heart stopped. "Liam." The child stirred, let out a small cry. Julian's hands trembled. He reached out, not as a CEO, not as a groom, but as a man facing the undeniable. "May I?" he asked. Lena hesitated, then nodded. She stepped forward and gently, trustingly placed the infant into Julian's arms. And in that moment, as Julian Carter cradled a child that may have been his son, his brother, or both, everything around him changed. The crowd disappeared. The wedding vanished. The only thing that remained was a fragile connection, restored not through blood alone, but through courage. Julian's words still rang in the air. Her name was Anne Wolfe. She tried to warn us, and we buried her story. For the first time, Vivian didn't have a retort ready. The courtyard, once prepared for champagne and string quartets, had become a courtroom. And the matriarch of Prescott Pharmaceuticals, who had ruled by certainty and control her entire life, was now cornered by the very thing she'd tried to suppress: truth. Vivian Carter took a breath. It was shallow, controlled, but Julian saw it the way her shoulders curled inward slightly, like armor cracking under pressure. "She was unstable," she said at last, her voice measured. "You didn't know what she was becoming. The things she was accusing us of, accusing me of, it could have ruined everything." "She wasn't unstable," Julian replied. "She was scared. There's a difference. She sent emails to the press, Julian, to regulators. She made accusations she couldn't back up. She backed them up with science," he said quietly. "You just buried it." Vivian's mouth flattened into a line, but her silence was damning. The crowd was still. Somewhere in the distance, a camera clicked. The guests didn't shift, didn't whisper. They were transfixed. "She told me Neosolve was hurting babies," Lena said, her small voice breaking the heavy air. "She had a notebook. It had dates, names, hospitals. But then it was gone. She told me to come to you because you were good once." Julian flinched. The words felt like both a gift and a punishment. He stepped forward slowly, as if the ground beneath him had become unfamiliar. "Lena, can you tell me, did your mom ever say who knew about this? Who else might have seen it? She said someone called the board wanted it buried. She said," Grandma Lena looked at Vivian, "said it would all go away if she just stopped talking." Vivian turned away slightly, unable to meet her granddaughter's eyes. Julian's jaw clenched, and when she didn't stop, she was let go. No references, no explanation, just gone. "She said she was going to speak at a health forum," Lena whispered. "But then we had to move. She stopped talking about it." Julian looked down at Liam, still nestled against his chest. The child's breath was slow, steady, but fragile. "We're not going to move again," he said softly. "You're home now." That night, the headlines exploded. Prescott CEO's wedding interrupted by child claiming paternity. Whistleblower's daughter speaks out. Neosolve under renewed FDA scrutiny. Family scandal rocks pharmaceutical giant. By morning, Julian was no longer a groom, he was a liability. The board called an emergency meeting at 10 a.m. sharp. The top-floor conference room, usually sleek and airless, was tense with barely contained panic. "This is spiraling," Charles Vance, the CFO, said, wiping sweat from his brow. 2 investors already pulled their funding overnight." "And that's just the start," said another board member. "The FDA has reopened the file. There's a risk of criminal inquiry." Julian sat at the head of the table, the Prescott logo gleaming behind him like a monument to legacy. He didn't flinch. "What's our current exposure?" he asked calmly. "There are emails. Anne's emails. Records. She'd copied herself on everything," said a legal advisor. "If they get subpoenaed, it's damning." "Then let them," Julian said. The room fell silent. Vivian, sitting across the table in a gray silk blouse, didn't blink. "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm holding a press conference," Julian said. Today, I'll disclose everything: Anne's findings, the trial records, the silencing, and I'll submit all internal documents to the FDA myself. Gasps rippled around the room. Charles leaned forward, eyes wild. You'll tank the company? Julian shook his head. We're already sinking. We just haven't admitted it yet. Do you have any idea what the fallout will be? Vivian asked, voice steel. You'll lose your seat. You'll be finished. Julian turned to her slowly. Maybe, but if I stay quiet, we lose our soul. You're talking like a martyr. I'm talking like a father. Vivian went still. For the first time in decades, Julian saw something close to hesitation on her face. Your father built this company, she said, softer now. He believed in healing. You can't heal with fire, Julian. Julian looked straight at her. Sometimes you burn what's infected, so the rest can live. That afternoon, the world watched as Julian Carter stood at a podium outside the Prescott building, cameras flashing, microphones crowding around his suit like claws. Lena stood just behind him, holding Liam's hand. Vivian was nowhere in sight. I'm here today not as a CEO, Julian began, but as a son, as a father, and as a man who must own what was hidden in my name. He spoke for 7 minutes. About Anne, about her research, about the trial results that were altered, the calls that were ignored, the fear that swallowed a woman who only wanted to protect children. I failed her. I failed all of you. And I won't fail again. When he stepped away, the silence was stunned, but then someone clapped, then another and another. And as Julian looked down at his daughter and the baby in her arms, something inside him that had been locked away for years, some place of integrity, of love, of grief, finally opened wide. For the first time in a long time, Julian Carter didn't feel like he was pretending to be the man he hoped to be. He was becoming him. The storm didn't pass quietly. In the days following Julian Carter's press conference, the world descended like thunder. Headlines screamed across networks: Pharma, Eric Spose's family scandal, whistleblower vindicated, posthumously Prescott Pharmaceuticals under criminal investigation. Shares plummeted, lawsuits bloomed like weeds. Activists who once chanted outside Prescott's headquarters now spoke with urgency, armed with validation. The company that had stood for half a century, its reputation built on white coats and blue pills, was unraveling in real time, and Julian stood in the eye of it. He sat through meetings with lawyers, congressional panels, and grieving families who had lost infants they now suspected were harmed by Neosolve. He apologized not with scripted language, but with the raw, unfiltered honesty of a man who had failed to see what mattered and was willing to spend his life making it right. At night, when the microphones were gone, Julian came home. To Lena, who now kept her suitcase stored in the closet rather than by the door. To Liam, whose lungs still struggled at times, but were improving steadily with treatment. To a quiet estate that no longer felt like a fortress, but a place of rebuilding. Sometimes Julian would pass by the unused wedding arch still standing in the garden. The petals had long dried, and the ribbons had faded, but he left it there, an altar to a truth that had saved him more than 1,000 lies ever could. And then one day she came back. It was late afternoon when the doorbell rang. Julian opened it to find his mother standing on the front steps. No chauffeur, no pearls. Her coat was damp from rain, and her eyes were older than he remembered. "May I come in?" she asked. He didn't speak. He only stepped aside. They sat in the study opposite the fireplace, where portraits of ancestors looked on with silent judgment. Julian offered no tea, no pretense. They sat in silence until Vivian broke it. "I thought I was protecting you," she said softly. "The company. Our name." "You were protecting yourself," he said, "from shame, from weakness, from admitting you were wrong." She looked at the floor. Anne was right, and I knew it. I knew it when the Honduras trial came in, when the mortality rate ticked higher. I told myself she was exaggerating, but I saw the data. I saw it, and I let her go. The admission didn't bring him joy. It didn't ease the ache in his chest, but it was a beginning. "Lena deserves the truth," Julian said. "I want to speak with her," Vivian said. "When she's ready. She's 10, but she carries the strength of 10 lifetimes. Don't lie to her. I won't. She stood to leave. At the door she paused. Your father would have hated what you did. Julian looked up. Then I'm glad he isn't here to stop me. The company didn't survive, not in the form it had once held. Prescott Pharmaceuticals was dissolved, restructured, and reborn. They called it Wolf & Carter Health. It was more than rebranding, it was redemption. Julian used the fortune not for damage control, but for change. He founded pediatric care centers. He launched an internal ethics board with veto power over executive decisions. He brought in researchers who had once been blackballed for challenging results. And he placed Anne's name, Anne Wolf, on the founding charter. The press called it idealistic. Investors called it risky. But parents called it overdue. Lena adjusted to school slowly. She was shy, at first reluctant to raise her hand, but her science teacher soon realized the girl was brilliant, analytical, intuitive, and startlingly mature. When career day came around, she didn't dress up like a doctor or a lawyer. She came in jeans and a t-shirt that read, "Ask me about the truth." Liam grew stronger. He took his first real steps in the kitchen, just as Julian was pouring milk into his cereal. Julian wept, arms outstretched, catching his brother, or perhaps his son, on wobbly legs that carried the weight of 2 generations' redemption. Vivian, true to her word, apologized on live television. She admitted her role in the cover-up. She resigned from every board seat she held. Then she moved into a modest cottage near the outskirts of Boston. Once a month she visited Lena and Liam. Sometimes she brought flowers, sometimes just herself. She didn't speak much, but she listened now, which was something she had never done before. Julian began writing again, not memos or speeches, but letters. To Anne. Every Sunday he'd sit at the desk she once shared with him, in the research lab, pen in hand, and write as though she were still there. He told her what Lena said that week, how Liam was sleeping, what ethics board vote passed, how he wished she could see the wing they were building in her name. On the 1-year anniversary of the interrupted wedding, there was no ceremony. Instead, there was a ribbon cutting. At the Boston Children's Hospital, a new pediatric research center opened, funded entirely by Wolf & Carter Health. It bore a plaque in honor of Anne Wolf, whose courage changed the world. Julian stood beside Lena, holding the scissors together. Liam sat on his hip, clapping at the crowd. "Ready," Julian whispered. Lena nodded. "For what?" "For a life we build honestly." She smiled. "Then let's start." And they did. As the ribbon fluttered to the ground and cameras flashed, Julian didn't look at the press. He looked at his children. Not in shame, but with peace. He had once built an empire on ambition. Now he was building something better, on love, truth, and the tiny hands that had pulled him out of ruin. The ending was never meant to be perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs. One of the most powerful messages in Lena's truth is the courage to confront the past in order to build a better future. Julian Carter. A man who built his life on control, perfection, and image is forced to face the uncomfortable truth he had long buried. Through Lena's bravery and the unfiltered innocence of a child seeking help, he discovers that redemption doesn't come from denial. It comes from accountability. The story reminds us that families are not built by blood alone, but by the choices we make when truth is laid bare. In a world that often rewards silence and image, Lena's truth calls on us to choose integrity over legacy, healing over hiding. Whether you're a parent, a leader, or someone carrying unspoken pain, the lesson is the same. Speak the truth, even when it shakes the ground beneath you. Because from that brokenness, something real can begin. As Julian learns, redemption isn't about erasing the past, it's about owning it and choosing a different path. That's a lesson we all can carry. The truth may hurt, but it can also set us free.